In this video, we'll learn about making selection sets in AutoCAD. So in AutoCAD, you can make selection of objects in many different ways, and we have been doing it in the previous lessons also. So the most basic way of selecting objects is by a simple window and a crossing window. So here we have some objects here in the drawing area. Now let's say that we want to select objects here. Now in this part, so in order to make a selection, you can click on the left side of the screen. So I'm clicking on the left side of the screen and I'm stretching my cursor towards right. And now in this case, we have this solid window, and everything which is included in this solid window will be included in our selection set. Now if you expand this window, you'll notice that we are trying to include more objects, but when you look at this rectangle here, you'll notice that it is not included in our selection set, even though this window is touching it. So the only criteria for objects to be selected with this window is it should be completely included in this window, which this rectangle is not fulfilling, and that's why it's not added to our selection set. So let's now click here, and everything has been selected except the rectangle and the text, because they were partially inside and partially outside. Now let's repeat the process, and we'll repeat it with another window. So now I'll click on the right side of the drawing area and I'll move my cursor towards left. And now we have this dashed window, and in this case you'll notice that everything which is completely inside this window is obviously selected, and it is included in our selection set, but also the objects which are touching this window are selected, and this rectangle and the text here are also included in the selection set, although they are partially inside and partially outside, but still they are selected because they are touching the window. So this is the second way of selecting objects. So you can use either of these options, and we have many other options also for making selection. So the next one is window polygon, and to make a window polygon, click at any point to start the selection set, and now look at the command line. Here we have this window polygon option. So click on this window polygon, and now we can make a polygon to include some selective objects. For example, let's say that we want to include only L4 and L7 in this case here, just like this. So we can make this kind of selection window, and if you want to include ACV block also, so you can make this window something like this. And now in this window, ACV is also included, but we are obviously leaving the L1 geometry here. So in this way you can create different kind of selection windows. Now press enter and the objects will be selected just like this. In a similar way, we can make a crossing polygon also. So click anywhere in the drawing area to start the selection set, and now click on this crossing polygon option from the command line. And now we can make a crossing polygon which is similar to the window polygon, but in this case all the objects which even touch the boundaries of this crossing polygon will be included in the selection set. And obviously in this case the ACV text and this block are simply touching the boundaries, and they are also included in the selection set. Now press enter, and here we have it. The objects are now selected. So we have one more selection set here, and for that I'll again click at any point here to start it, and we have this first option, fence. Now using fence, you can create a fence, and whatever object is touched by this fence will be selected. So in this case you can see that this fence is simply touching the objects, and all of these objects are now included in our selection set. Now press enter, and here we have it. The objects are included in the selection set. In the AutoCAD 2018 version, AutoCAD added an off-screen selection, and the off-screen selection is helpful for selecting this kind of long geometries. So let's say that we want to make a selection by zooming this drawing, and we just want to include our selection somewhere from here. Now we are including the objects in our selection set, and along with inclusion of objects, we are also moving the drawing towards right. So now we are scrolling it, we are panning it here, and now we are including many objects. Now let's click here. Now all of these objects which are present in the screen are obviously selected, but in the previous versions of AutoCAD, if you would have panned your drawing, you will find that these objects would be removed from the selection set, but not anymore with AutoCAD 2018 version. So with AutoCAD 2018 version, all the objects which are not present in the screen will also be selected if you have included them in the selection set. So now when you zoom out, you'll notice not present on the screen while making the selection. So that's a new enhancement in AutoCAD 2018 version. So this was all about creating selection sets in AutoCAD, and using these selection set you can make some intelligent selections even in the crowded drawings. In this video, I will tell you about move and copy tools of AutoCAD. So here we have this rectangle and we have a circle here on one of the vertices. Now let's say that we want to move this circle on the second vertex here. So for that, we can select the move tool from the modify panel. So select the move tool, now click on the circle, press enter, and now specify the base point. As you can see here, the command line prompts you to specify the base point. So the base point will be the point from where the object will be picked. Now click here and you will notice that the object will now move along with our cursor. Now look at the command line and it now prompts you to specify the second point. So the second point will be the destination point where you want to move it, and click there to move the object. So that's quite simple. Now we have a copy tool here. So using the copy tool, you can make copies of this original object. Now let's say that we want to make copies of this circle on the remaining 3 vertices. For that, simply select the circle, press enter, and once again select the base point. So the base point will be this midpoint in this case as well. And now click at the destination point, which is this one. And now click again on the destination point and click again on the destination point. And now when you want to exit this command, simply press enter, and here we have it, the copies of the original object on these 3 vertices. If you want, you can also make multiple copies of a single object using the copy tool. So let's make a simple rectangle here just like this. Now let's assume that we want to make 6 copies of this rectangle at a particular distance. For that, I'll select the copy tool and now select the object and press enter. Now specify the base point. So this will be the point from where we want to pick the objects. And now as you can see that we only have a single copy of this object. Now you can make multiple copies using the array tool. Here we have this array tool. So click on this array and now enter number of items. So we'll add 6 as number of items. Now press enter, and here we have it. We have 6 objects instead of 1 as copies. And now you can click at any point to place all of these objects, and they will be placed at uniform distance. Now if you want to apply the complete distance, the distance between the first and the last object, then simply select this fit option. And now you can see that our cursor moves to the last object, and we can apply the complete distance, and based upon that all the objects will be equally placed. So I'll click somewhere at this point, and here we have it. Now simply press enter to escape this command, and here we have it, the multiple copies of a single object. So in this way you can use move and copy tool in AutoCAD. this video I will tell you about the rotate command of AutoCAD. So here we have the simple line object. So let's first look at this line object, and if you want to rotate this object to any particular angle, you can do that with the rotate command. So on the modify panel, here you will find this rotate tool. So click on this rotate and now select the object which you want to rotate and press enter. Now the command line will prompt you to specify the base point, and the base point will be the fixed point or the pivot point about which the object will rotate. So in the first case, let's select this corner as the base point, and now you'll notice that the object will move along with our cursor. So you can click anywhere in the drawing area to place this object and it will be rotated to that angle, or you can add an exact value of angle using the command line. So let's say that we want to rotate it to an angle of 30 degrees. So for that I'll type 30 and now press enter, and here we have it. The object is now rotated to an angle of 30 degrees, and the rotation simply means that if you draw a single line, then the angle between this line and this line will be 30 degrees in anti-clockwise direction. So that's the direction which is always positive in AutoCAD. Now let's say that we want to make this line in the downward direction. So for that I'll simply add -30 instead of 30. So let's press Ctrl Z for a couple of times and now select the rotate tool and click on this line, press enter, select the same base point, and instead of 30 let's enter -30, press enter, and now you can see that the line is rotated to this angle which is below the horizontal line. So let's press Ctrl Z to get back to the original condition. Now in both of these cases you have noticed that the original line is removed and it is rotated to that angle. Now what if we also want to retain this line and we also want to make a copied line at the required angle? For that we can select the rotate tool, select the object, press enter, specify base point, and now select the copy option from the command line and now enter the angle. So let's say that we want to enter 45 and press enter. So in this case the original line is also retained and a copy will be rotated to the required angle. Now let's look at one more case, and in this situation we'll change the base point. So let's select the rotate tool, select the object, press enter, and now in this case I'll select the midpoint as the base point, and now you'll notice that the object will be rotated from that point, and you can obviously add the angle, let's say 60, and here we have it, the rotated line. Let's now erase it. So now let's look at this case. In this situation we have this line which is inclined to this horizontal line, and we don't know the angle to which this line is inclined. Now if we want to rotate this line to an angle of let's say 60 degrees with respect to this line, so that the final angle is 60 degrees plus whatever angle this is, then we can use the reference option. And for that select the rotate tool, select the object, press enter, select the base point, select the reference tool, and now specify the reference angle which is 0 in this case. So let's type 0 and press enter. Now we need to enter the final angle which is 60 and press enter. So now the final angle for this line will be 60 degrees plus whatever the angle of the original line was. So in the initial case the line was inclined to an angle of 16 degrees, so the final angle will be 76. Let's check it. So I'll select the angle tool, click on these two lines, and yes, we have this inclined to an angle of 76 degrees. And if you want to verify that, let's press Ctrl Z for a couple of times and let's check the original angle. So I'll click on these two lines, and yes, we have this line inclined to an angle of 16 degrees. So even without knowing the angle of these lines, you can change its direction or you can rotate them to whatever angle you want from their own position. You can use this reference option to rotate this line to any final angle also. For example, in this case we again don't know the angle of this line. Let's assume that we don't know, and we want to rotate this line to a final angle of 30 degrees with respect to this horizontal line. For that I'll select this rotate command. Now select the line and press enter. Now specify the base point, and now once again select the reference option, but in this case we will specify the reference angle, and for that I'll click at this point and then click at this point. Now you'll notice that the cursor will move along with this line, and now we need to enter the final angle up to which you want to rotate it. So we want to rotate it to an angle of 30 degrees, so type 30, press enter. So now the line has been rotated to an angle of 30 degrees with respect to this horizontal line, and it hardly matters whatever the initial angle was. So we can also check this. So let's select the angle option, select this line, and yes, we have an angle of 30 degrees here. So in this way you can rotate a line to any final angle even without knowing its initial angle with respect to the positive side of x-axis. In this video I will tell you about the offset command of Autocad. So here we have these two simple geometries and we will use offset command on them. So from the modify panel, select this offset tool. Now look at the command line. It prompts you to specify an offset distance. So let's select 2 as the offset distance and press enter. Now you need to select the object which you want to offset. So in this case I'll select this line, and now look at the second line. So now a copy of this line has been made here on this direction because our cursor is towards this side, but if I move my cursor here, a new copy will be made on this side. So you can simply click on this side of the line and a copy will be made like this. Now if you want to create another copy of this object, simply click on this line and click here. In a similar way you can keep creating copies of this line on either side using the offset tool, and the gap between all of these lines is 2 units. So let's now press escape key and press Ctrl Z. Now let's say that we want to make multiple copies of this line without selecting the offset tool again and again. For that, select the offset tool. Now specify the offset distance, which is 2 in this case, and now select the object, and from the command line select this multiple option. Now you can see that our command is still in continuation even after clicking. So I clicked and still we have this command, and now you can keep on clicking on the side where you want to create multiple offsets. You can repeat the process for this side as well. So now let's press escape key again and let's press Ctrl Z. Now if you don't want to specify any particular distance for offset, you can use the through option. So select the offset tool, and now here we have this through option. So let's select it and now select the object, and now you'll notice that the offset geometry will follow our cursor. So we can simply click here to make the geometry, and you can select it once again and make another copy at some random distance dynamically by clicking anywhere in the drawing area. Now again press escape key to exit the command and press Ctrl Z to get back here. Now if you want to create an offset by erasing the source object, that also you can do. And for that, once again select the offset tool, and now from your command line select this erase option, and here you notice that erase source object after offsetting option has been set to no. That's why a copy of the original object is made and without erasing this object. So I'll select yes in this case, and now once again I'll repeat the process. So I'll type 2 as the offset distance, click on this object, and now click at a particular distance, and here we have it. The original object has been deleted and an offset copy has been made here. So you can again go back to the offset command and go to the erase and change it to no once again. And now if you offset, the original object will also be retained. You can use offset command on this geometry as well, and for that I'll once again select the offset tool, and now here also I'll specify the distance. So let's specify 1 as the distance, the offset distance, press enter, and now click on the object, and now click outside, and you'll notice that a copy will be made outside. And now let's select the original object and click inside. So we have 2 copies, one outside and one inside, and the distance between all of these objects is 1 unit. So the distance between this rectangle and this one is 1 unit on all the sides. Similarly, the distance between this line segment and this line segment of the rectangle is also 1 unit. So let's now erase both of them. And now let's look at some other options related to the offset tool. So here the offset is making the similar geometry which we have made here, but if you want to apply rounded corners on the offset geometry, you can do that by changing the offset gap type system variable. So let's type offset gap type and press enter, and now here you'll notice that the default value of this offset gap type variable is set to 0. Let's change this value to 1 and press enter. Now we will again make the offset. So select the offset tool, specify offset distance as 1, press enter, and now click on the object, and now click outside, and now we have a different geometry here. In this case, the fillet has been applied, or the rounded corners are applied with a radius of 1 unit. So that's the same radius which is equal to the gap of this object, or the offset gap. In a similar way, you can also apply a chamfer, and chamfer is simply a straight line. So let's erase this geometry, and let's change the value of offset gap type system variable. So let's type offset gap type, press enter. Now change this value to 2 and press enter. Now once again I'll select the offset tool. Again I'll select 1 as offset distance, and now in this case, instead of fillet, a chamfer has been applied. So I'll once again type offset gap type system variable and change its value to default 0. And now we can make the normal geometries using the offset tool. So once again I'll select offset, I'll select the through option, and now click on the object, and now you can see that we have a normal geometry here, just like this. In this video, I will tell you about mirror and scale command of AutoCAD. So here in this case, we have the simple geometry and a text here, and you can create the mirror image of both of these geometries in AutoCAD. So I'll start with this simple geometry here. So in order to create a mirror image of this geometry, select the mirror tool from the modify panel, and now look at the command line, which prompts you to select the objects. So select the object and press enter. Now the command line prompts you to specify the first point of mirror line. So click anywhere in the drawing area, that will be the first point, and now click at the second point of mirror line. And now you can see that a mirrored copy of original object will be made. And now click here, and now look at the command line. So now it prompts you to specify whether you want to erase the source object or not. So we don't want to erase this source object, so I'll select no, the default value, and simply press enter. So here we have the mirrored image. Now let's say that we want to make a mirror image of both of these objects on the upward side. So for that, I'll once again select the mirror tool. Now select both of these objects, press enter, and now specify this as the first mirroring point and this one as the second mirroring point, and simply press enter. Here we have it, the geometry as per our requirement. Now in case you want to make a complete mirror image of all of these 4 geometries somewhere over here, for that you can again select the mirror tool, select the complete set of objects, press enter. Now again you need to specify the mirroring line. So I'll select this as the first mirroring line and this point as the second mirroring line. And now let's erase the source object in this case. So I'll click on yes, and the source object is deleted and a copy of that object is made here. So now let's press Ctrl Z a couple of times to return back to the original geometry. Now we'll try the mirror tool on this text also. So select the mirror tool, select the text, press enter. Now click at a point and then click at second point and press enter. But in this case, you'll notice that the mirror copy has not been made. It is simply a copy of this original object, and these 2 objects are not laterally inverted as it was in case of this object. So in order to make a mirror image of text, you need to ensure that the mirror text system variable is set to 1. So I'll make a copy of this object here, and now I'll apply the mirror tool once again on this text. So before that, I'll change the system variable. So let's type mirror text and change its value to 1 and press enter. Now select the mirror tool, select the text, press enter, specify the first point and the second point and press enter. Now we have it as a mirror image, and you can compare it with the original copy or the original mirror image which we have made without using the mirror text system variable. So in this case, the mirror text system variable was set to 0. In this case, it was set to 1. So I'll once again type mirror text and I'll change its value to default 0. Now let's look at the scale tool. So here we have a simple geometry, and now let's assume that we want to increase the size of this geometry. So in order to increase the size, you can use the scale tool. So simply select the scale tool here on the modify panel, select the object, press enter, and now look at the command line. It now prompts you to specify the base point. So base point will be the point which will remain fixed when the object will be elongated or contracted. when the size of this object will change, the base point will remain fixed. So I'll select this lower left corner as the base point, and now you'll notice that the size of object changes along with our cursor. So you can either select the cursor, or you can dynamically apply the size using the cursor, or you can also enter a scale factor. So in order to increase the size, simply add a value which is greater than 1. So if you add a value 1.5, then the size will increase to 1.5 times of the original value. So if you type a scale factor of 2, it will make a geometry which is twice the size of original object. If you type 3, it will make a geometry of thrice the size, and so on. Similarly, if you type 0.5 as a scale factor, it will decrease the size to half of its original value, and so on. So I'll type 1.2 in this case and press enter. And here we have it. The larger geometry has been made. So now let's press Ctrl Z to get back to the original geometry. Now in case you want to make a copy of this object after scaling, then you need to select that corresponding option. So I'll select the scale tool again, select the object, press enter, specify the base point, and now here we have an option of copy. So let's select this copy option, and now let's reduce its size to half of its original value. So I'll type 0.5, press enter, and now you'll notice that we have a copied image. Let's select and move it outside. So the size of this object is half of the size of this object in all of these dimensions. So let's now press Ctrl Z to return back to the original geometry. Now in this case, the size of this object is somewhat close to 950 units, and let's make a line which is equal to 1000 units. So I'll make a line of length 1000 units. And here we have it. So now you can see that there is a slight gap between this endpoint and this line. So let's assume that we want to scale this drawing in such a way that the base length becomes 1000 units and all the remaining length stretches in the similar proportion. For that, we can use scale reference option. So once again, go to the scale tool and now select the object and press enter. Now specify the base point, which we have specified in the previous case also, and from the command line select this reference option. Now we need to specify the reference length, which is the length of this line from this point to this point. So I'll simply click at this point, and now I'll click at this point. So that's the reference length. Now you need to specify the new length, and the new length is 1000 units. So simply stretch it and click at the end of this 1000 unit length line. So click here, and here we have it. So now the base length is equal to 1000 units and the remaining lengths are proportionally changed. So you can now erase that original line. It's no longer required. So in this way, you can use mirror and scale command in AutoCAD. In this video, I will tell you about the trim and extend command of AutoCAD. So let's select the trim tool from the modify panel, and here we have this trim tool. You can also expand the flyout and select the trim tool. Now after selecting the trim, simply press enter, and now click on the segment which you want to remove. So in this case, we have made all of these objects with rectangle, which is a polyline, and let's now assume that we want to remove from the segment. For example, we want to remove this segment from this boundary to this boundary. So now when I move my cursor on this segment, the transparency of this segment increases and it becomes dull, and also preview is shown that shows the part which will be trimmed. So let's click, and the part is trimmed. Now let's move to this part, and here also it will be trimmed from this boundary to this boundary. In a similar way, you can click on any part of this geometry. For example, if you click here, it will trim this object from this boundary to this corner. And similarly, you can trim this part, and you can keep on trimming as long as there is a boundary. Now here also you can click here, and that will trim the geometry from this corner to this corner. Now let's press escape key, and this trim tool is helpful not only for trimming these line segments, but it can trim arcs, circles and other geometries also. So basically all of the geometries can be trimmed using the trim tool. So now let's press Ctrl Z a couple of times to get the original geometry here. So now let's select the trim tool, and let's look at other method of trimming the objects. So now I'll select the trim, and once again I'll simply press enter. Now after pressing enter, look at the command line, and it now prompts you to select from multiple options. So let's select fence. In the previous case, we have not selected any of these options, but in this case, I'll select the fence option. And now using the fence option, you can create fences, and all the parts which are crossed by the fence will be trimmed. For example, you can see that the line segment is crossing that fence, so it has been trimmed. This part is also trimmed, so let's now click here. Let's trim this one also. Let's trim this fence, and let's trim this one, and let's trim this one. So now you can see that all the line segments which are crossed by this fence are trimmed. Simply press enter to apply the change, and here we have it. So all of those segments are now trimmed. So let's press escape key, and let's press Ctrl Z to get back the original geometry. Now let's go to the trim tool again, and now don't press enter. So in the previous cases, we have directly pressed enter, and by pressing enter, we have selected all of the objects in the drawing area. And by selecting the objects, we were essentially allowing the trim tool to trim objects with the very next boundary. But in this case, we can select the boundaries which will be selected for trimming. So let's assume that we want to trim our objects only with respect to this red boundary. So I'll select this red object and now press enter. Now when you click on the objects, it will only be trimmed up to the red boundary. So here we have this white rectangle. So let's now click on this portion here, and now you'll notice that the complete portion will be removed, which is outside this red rectangle. Similarly, if you click on this one, the complete portion which is outside this rectangle is removed. If you select the green rectangle, the complete portion which is inside this red rectangle is removed, and if you select this yellow one, there will not be any change because it's completely inside. It's not touching the boundary here of this red rectangle. But in this case, it will be trimmed. In this case, it will not be trimmed. Now in this case, you can see that we don't have any boundary, any object outside this red box, and that is why it's a single segment and that cannot be trimmed. So let's now press escape key, and let's press Ctrl Z a couple of times to get back the original geometry. In trim tool, you can trim any object as long as there is a boundary. So if you create an object, let's say that we create this 3-point arc somewhere inside this object here, just like this, and we want to trim this object. So this will only be trimmed if a next boundary is found. So let's select the trim tool, press enter, and now I'll click somewhere inside this geometry and I'll click this part, and the part has been removed. Now let's click on this part and let's click on this part. Now if you click on this part, it won't be trimmed because there is no boundary after that. So we have this one as the last boundary. After that, we don't have any boundary. Now let's click on this part here, and now we have these two segments here. So let's now click on this part here. And now this is once again a completely single segment with no boundary. So here we have a boundary, but we don't have any object on this side. Here we also have a boundary, but we don't have any object. So this is a single segment and it won't be trimmed. Similarly, for all the remaining segments also the same rule applies. So let's press escape key and Ctrl Z a couple of times. The extend tool is completely opposite of this trim tool, and it will extend the geometries to the next boundary. So for selecting the extend tool, I'll make a line here just like this, and also I'll make a 3-point arc. Now go to this flyout and select the extend tool. Now once again press enter, and that will select all the objects in the drawing area, and wherever the next boundary is found, the object will be extended. So in this case, I'll click on this line, and you'll notice that it will be extended up to the next boundary, which is the arc here. And now I click here, once again it's extended to next boundary, to next boundary, and to next boundary, and the same system will follow. If you select on this arc, it will also extend to the next boundary, but if you click on it now, there will not be any change because it cannot extend and it cannot make a complete circle. Now let's press escape and Ctrl Z once again. Now let's say that in this case also we want to select a particular boundary for the extend tool. We can do that. So I'll select the extend tool again, and now I'll select this yellow boundary and press enter. Now click on this line and you'll notice that it will bypass all the extra geometries which are present before this yellow rectangle. So it will directly extend the object up to this yellow object, and it will bypass these three geometries. Now if you click on this again, it will extend it up to the next boundary of this yellow rectangle, and it will bypass both of these objects. So by making a selection for extend, you can create extended geometries which behave in a particular way. So let's press escape key and Ctrl Z a couple of times. The trim and extend tool can be used using a single command also. So in the previous case we saw that we can toggle this trim and extend tool from the flyout, but you can select the trim tool and use it for extending the object. So right now you can see that I've selected the trim tool, but now I'll press enter, and now I'll simply press and hold my shift key. So pressing and holding the shift key will change the command to its next counterpart, and now I'll click on this line segment, and now you can see that it's extending it even though we have the trim command active, and the similar condition will apply on the extend tool as well. So let's press escape key and get back to the original geometry, and I'll also erase both of these objects. So this was all about the trim and extend tool of AutoCAD. In this video, I will tell you about erase, explode and overkill command of AutoCAD. So here we have these two geometries. In the first case, we have this as a block, and we'll learn about blocks later on in this course. But for now, just assume that a block is a single entity here, and it is made up of many different drawing objects which we have seen so far. We have this arc here, we have the line segment, and all of these objects combine together to make a single block. But in this case, we have this object made up of simple objects. In this case, we have this rectangle, we have these line segments and an arc. So they are completely separate from each other. Now, if you want to make any object and if you want to convert it into its simplest form, then you can use the explode tool. In this case, we have this block, and when you click on this block, we'll find that here we have a single grip and it's completely behaving as a single object. In order to break it into different parts, simply select the explode tool, and here we have this explode tool. Select the explode tool, click on the object and press enter, and now move to this object, and you'll notice that now it has been reduced to its separate units. We can now select all of these objects separately, even though it was a block initially. In a similar way, if you click on this rectangle, you'll find that it's completely a single polyline, and it has 4 different line segments. But you can also explode this geometry to reduce it into its simplest form. So once again, select the explode tool, click on this rectangle and press enter. And now when you click on this object, you'll notice that it's a single line segment, and similarly all the objects have been broken down into their simplest segments. In order to erase any of these objects, you can select the erase tool from the modify panel, and then select the complete set of objects and press enter. So that will erase the objects. Or you can also use the alternate method, which is selecting the objects and pressing the delete key on your keyboard. There is also one more method, and that's simply selecting the object and deleting it from the right contextual menu. So you can select any of these options for erasing an object. When making any drawing, there will be conditions when you'll make some overlapping geometries. For example, in this case, we have the simple geometry which is made with single segments everywhere. But what if we need to make some overlapping geometries? For example, I've selected the line tool, and now I've clicked at this point, and now I need to take reference of that point, so that's why I click there. And now from that point I need to select a distance of, let's say, 60 units. So I'll type 60, press enter, and now I need to move upwards, and I need to enter a distance of 150 units, press enter, and now I need to join it with this point. So now in this case, you know that we have an overlapping line here which is above this line, and in a similar way there may be situations where you need to create many overlapping geometries. So you can manually remove those overlapping geometries, but that will take time. But there is a direct method in AutoCAD that can be used to remove all the overlapping geometries, and that's overkill. So go to the modify panel, expand it, and select this overkill option. You can also use its command equivalent, which is overkill, and then select the complete set of objects and press enter. Now don't change anything in this window, simply click OK, and now we don't have any overlapping object here. So now if you click here, you'll see that we only have a single line. And similarly, if there would have been any object which are overlapping any other object in this drawing, that would also have been removed. So this was all about erase, explode and overkill command of AutoCAD. In this video, I will tell you about the stretch command of AutoCAD. And using the stretch tool, you can change the shape of geometries in very particular ways. For example, in this case, we have this bathtub, and let's say that we want to increase the length of this bathtub. For that, we can use the stretch tool. So select the stretch tool from the modify panel and now select the objects. But in this case, you need to select objects in a very specific way. And if you expand this command line, you'll notice that it's also prompting you to select it with only crossing window or crossing polygon. So now in order to make a crossing window, I'll click on the right side and I'll move my cursor towards left, just like this. And here we have this crossing window with dashed boundaries. Now in this case also, I'm not selecting the complete bathtub. Instead, I'm selecting it only partially. Now all the objects which are completely inside this crossing window will remain unaffected, and all the objects which are completely outside this stretch window will also remain unaffected. So in this case, this line segment, this complete arc, and this line segment, this part of geometry will remain completely unaffected. But the length of these 4 lines will change, because in this case, only these 4 lines are partially inside and partially outside. So now simply click at any point to make this stretch window and press enter. Now click anywhere and click on any side where you want to stretch it. So in this case, you can see that the length of only those 4 line segments which were partially inside and partially outside our window is changing, and rest of the geometry is completely unchanged. So you can decrease or increase the length here, just like this. Now similarly, if you want to change the geometry here also, you can do that. So I'll once again select the stretch tool, and now in this case, let's assume that we want to increase the height of this panel here, and we want to keep this panel unchanged. So for that, we need to make this stretching window in a specific way, just like this. Now in this case, we have these 6 line segments which are crossing this crossing window, and they are partially inside and partially outside. Rest of the geometry will remain completely unchanged. So let's click, press enter, click at a point, and now move upwards, and you'll notice that only the 6 line segments which were partially inside and partially outside have changed their length, and rest of the geometry remain completely unchanged. Now let's assume that we want to change its length even further, and we want to increase its length in horizontal direction. For that, I'll select the stretch tool, click at a point here, make this window like this, and obviously now you understand that which part will be affected. So in this case, all of these segments are partially inside and partially outside, so only the length of these segments will change. So now press enter, click at a point and stretch it, just like this. So in this way, we can use a stretch tool in AutoCAD to change the shape of geometries or stretch them in a particular way. In this video, I will tell you about break and join command of AutoCAD. So I'll start with the break tool, and you can find the break tool in the expanded modify panel. So select that arrow to expand the modify panel, and here you will find this, the break tool and break at a point tool. So we have these 2 break tools. So I'll select the break at a point tool in the first case, and now using this tool, you can break any object in 2 different parts. So in this case, we have this line segment which is completely a single segment. As you can see that when I hover my cursor over this object, the complete segment is selected. Now let's say that we want to break it in 2 different parts from its midpoint. So for that, I'll select the object and now specify the first breakpoint as mentioned on the command line. So let's now click on this midpoint, and now the object is broken into 2 different parts. So let's select it, and now you'll notice that we have this as a separate segment, and you can obviously move it. So using the break tool, you can break any segment in 2 different parts. Now let's say that we also want to create a gap in between these segments, just like this. For that, I'll press press Ctrl Z so that the object now combines into a single segment, and I'll select the break tool once again. So in this case, instead of selecting the break at a point tool, I'll select this normal break tool, and now once again select the object. And now don't select the second point. The command line is obviously prompting you to select the second breakpoint, but don't select it. Click on this first point option and now specify the first point. So I'll select this one, the point somewhere around this, as the first point, and now I'll select second point somewhere around here. And now you can see that the object has been broken into two parts, and also there is a gap. So let's now press Ctrl Z to get back to the original geometry, and I'll select the break tool once again. So let's select the break tool, and now in this case I'll once again select the object, but in this case you need to select the object in a specific way. So let's say that we want to break this object in such a way that the gap is created of this length. So the gap should be equal to this length, which we have here, approximately equal to this one. So for that, select this object, but make sure that you click at a point which is close to this point. So I'll click somewhere over here, and by this click the object is selected and also the first point is assigned here. Now you simply need to select the second breakpoint as mentioned on the command line. So now you need to click close to this point, so let's now track it and click here, and here we have it. So this way you can create the gap of approximately same size on this segment. So I'll press Ctrl Z again, and now I'll select the break tool for this circle. So once again expand it, select the break tool and select the object here. Now we want to break a single quadrant here, and for that I'll select the first point and now click at this quadrant point and then click at this quadrant point. Now you can see that this quadrant is removed. So in this way you can use break tool to remove some of the segments from the circle, line or any other geometry. The opposite of this break tool is obviously the join tool, and using the join tool you can join broken objects into a single entity. So first I'll press Ctrl Z to return this object to its normal shape, and now I'll expand this modify panel and select the join tool. So here we have this join tool. Now select it, and now here we have a gap. In order to fill this gap, we can select the join tool. So click on this point here, close to this gap, and click on this line segment close to the gap and simply press enter. And now the gap has been filled and also the object is joined as a single entity. But in this case, the objects need to be collinear, or they should be on a single line. If the objects were not collinear, the join tool will not work. For example, if I move it a little bit upwards and then I'll try to join it, it won't join the objects. And as you can see that it failed to join these objects. Now for these situations we have a different tool. If you want to blend this gap, you can use the blend curves. So here we have this blend curves. Select the blend curves and now click close to this endpoint and click close to this point, and the gap has been filled with a spline, about which we have already learned. So in this way you can fill the gap using the blend tool. So let's press Ctrl Z a couple of times and let's look at this geometry. So now in this case we have this object as completely separate units. So we have these line segments and we also have this arc here. So all of these objects are completely separate. Now if you want to join them into a single unit, you can do that with the join tool. So once again expand the modify panel, select the join tool. Now select complete set of objects and press enter. Now click on this object and you will notice that the complete object is converted into a polyline and it's acting as a single unit. So using join tool, you can join objects which are already connected from end to end. And this was all about the break and join tool of Autocad. In this video, I will tell you about the fillet and chamfer tool of Autocad. So using the fillet tool, you can add rounded corners on the sharp edges, and using the chamfer tool, you can add a straight line at the vertices or sharp corners. So I'll start with this geometry here, and now go to the modify panel and select the fillet tool from this flyout. So here we have this fillet tool. Now expand the command line and you will be able to see the current settings of the fillet. So currently the mode has been set as trim mode and the radius is set to 0. So obviously we cannot make a fillet with 0 radius, so we need to change the radius first. So click on the radius option and now change the radius. So I'll type 1 as the radius for this fillet and press enter. Now look at the command line. It prompts you to specify the first object. So click on this line segment and that will be the first object. Now click on the second one and the fillet will be applied automatically. And as soon as the fillet is applied, the command will also end. Now if you want to repeat the fillet tool, simply press enter and you'll notice that the last settings are applied. So in this case the radius is 1 and the mode is trim mode. So you can again apply the next fillet simply by clicking on the 2 line segments. After applying the fillet, the command automatically exits, and if you don't want the command to exit automatically, you can select the multiple tool. So once again I'll press Ctrl Z a couple of times to return back to the original object, and now select this fillet tool. Now I'll select radius and change it to 1. Now here we have an option which is multiple option. So let's select this multiple option and now select the first segment and second segment, and now you can see that the command is still active. So using the multiple option you can create fillets on multiple edges without repeating the command again and again. So let's press escape key and press Ctrl Z. Now there is also a direct method of applying fillets on this kind of geometry. So in this case, if you click on any of the segments, you will notice that the complete geometry is selected. So this complete rectangle is made with a single segment. If you find this kind of geometry, you can apply fillet on all of these edges directly using single click. So for that, I'll once again select the fillet tool and I'll go to radius, select the radius of 1 unit, press enter, and now select the polyline tool. So in this case we know that our object is a polyline and it is completely connected. So select the polyline tool, click on the object, and the fillet will be applied on all of these 4 vertices. So let's press Ctrl Z to return back to the normal geometry. Up to this point we have seen that after applying the fillet, the extra portion is automatically chipped off, it's automatically removed. Now if you want to keep that extra portion, for example in this case, let's apply the fillet first. So I'll select the fillet tool, select the radius, select 1 as radius, and I apply fillet on this corner. Now the extra portion has been removed. Now what if you want to keep that extra portion also? For that you need to change the trim mode. So select the fillet, and here we have this mode as trim. So obviously we need to change this mode, and for changing this, click on this trim option and change it to no trim, and now apply the fillet. So I'll select this line segment and this line segment, and here we have it. The fillet has been applied, but this extra portion is also retained because we have changed the mode. And now you can apply the fillet by retaining the extra portion or the extra segment here. So obviously we do want to select the trim mode, we don't want this mode. So I'll go to this fillet option, click on this trim option, change it to trim mode, and now if I apply the fillet, it will remove the extra geometry. Now let's look at this condition here. Now in this case, both of these objects are not joining each other, but when we extend them somewhere, they connect each other. Now you can apply fillet on these objects as well. So select the fillet tool and now select the radius option, and in this case let's select a radius of 2 units and press enter. Now select the first object, select the second object, and we have the fillet here. So obviously the fillet is applied and the extra part of this line segment is also removed. Now press Ctrl Z, select the fillet tool, and in this case let's change the radius to 0 and press enter, and let's try to apply the fillet here. So I'll select the first line segment and the second one, and in this case you'll notice that the objects will connect at their apparent point of intersection. So here the radius has been set to 0, and by setting the radius to 0 you can extend the objects to intersect at their apparent point of intersection. So you can do that with fillet tool. Now all of these things can also be done for chamfer tool. So I'll press Ctrl Z a couple of times to get back the original geometry, which is this one, and I'll start the chamfer tool from the first rectangle here. So once again go to the flyout, select the chamfer tool, and now look at this mode here. So we have this trim mode obviously, but we have the chamfer distance as 0 for distance 1 and distance 2. So we need to change these parameters. So select the distance option and enter 1 as the first distance, and now enter 2 as second distance. And now I'll click on this line segment first, and then I'll click on this line segment as second distance. And now this chamfer has been applied. So in this case, we have applied the first chamfer distance as 1 unit, which will be this distance, the distance between this endpoint and the original vertex. The second chamfer distance was 2 units, which is the distance between the vertex and this endpoint. So the first and second distance is selected based on the point on which we click. So in this case, I clicked on this line segment first, so that became the first distance, and I clicked on this line segment, so that became the second distance. Now here we have the normal geometry. So in this case also, if you want to apply chamfer on all of these vertices, you can use the polyline option. So select the chamfer tool and select the distance, and I'll select 1 as the chamfer distance for first distance and also 1 for second distance. So in this case, we will have a completely uniform chamfer, and in this case also we have a multiple option. So using multiple option, you can repeat the command, and the chamfer command will not exit even after making the chamfer. And you can select the polyline option if you want to apply the chamfer on all of these vertices at once. So simply click here, and the chamfer has been applied on all of these vertices directly. In this case also, you can change the trim mode to retain the extra segment, and in this case also you can apply chamfer on this kind of geometry. So I'll select the chamfer tool and I'll select the distances here, and now I'll apply it in between these two segments. And here we have it, the distance 1 applied in between these two segments. So this was all about fillet and chamfer tool of AutoCAD. In this video, I will tell you about the lengthen and reverse tools of AutoCAD. So here we have these 3 simple geometries, and we'll start with the lengthen tool here. So you can use lengthen tool to find out the length of different objects in the AutoCAD drawing, and you can also use it to increase the existing length of the objects. For example, here we have a line and an arc. Now using the lengthen tool, we can increase their length, and here also we can increase the length of this arc or the circumference of this arc, so that will affect the included angle. So to start the lengthen tool, expand the modify panel and select the lengthen tool from here. Now select it and click on the object whose length you want to find. So in this case, I'll click on this line, and here we have the length of line, which is 100 units. Now let's assume that we want to find the length or the circumference of this arc, so click on it, and we have the circumference of the arc along with the included angle. So in this way, you can use this tool to find the length of different geometries. Now using this tool, you can also increase its length. So as you know that the length of this line is 100 units as shown here. Let's say that we want to change its length to 120 units. For that, I will select this delta option first. Now using delta option, you can change the length to any value. So here we want to change its length by 20 units. So type 20, press enter. Now click on the side on which you want to increase the length. So I'll click close to this endpoint, and the length will increase by 20 units towards right side. You can now also click on this left side to increase it by 20 units here, and you can keep on clicking if you want to increase length even further. Now let's press enter to exit this command. Now I'll press enter again to repeat the command, and now once again I'll change the length of this arc. So in the previous case we have changed the length of this line, now we'll change the length of this arc. But in this case, instead of using the delta option, I'll select the percent option. So let's select this percent option. Now using the percent option, you can also change the length of existing objects, and for that you can enter a value which is greater than 100 and also less than 100. So if you enter a value which is less than 100, for example 80, that will decrease the length, and it will decrease the length by 20%. And if you enter a value like 120%, it will increase the length of the existing object by 20%. So obviously entering a value of 100% will not make any change. So in this case, I'll enter a value of 70%, and now press enter. Now click on the side of arc from where you want to decrease the length, and here we want to decrease it. So you can see that the length will be reduced. So let's click and the length has been reduced to 70% of its original value. Again press enter to exit this command. Now you can also press enter to repeat it, and now we have a total length option here. So let's select this total length, and now you can enter a total length for the object. So in this case, we know that the length of this line is now 140 units because we have increased the length by 20 units towards right and left side. Now let's say that we want to decrease its length and we want to make it equal to 60 units. So I'll type 60 as the total length. Now press enter, and now click on the side from where you want to decrease it. So if you click on the right side, the length will be decreased from this side. If you click on the left side, the length will be decreased from there. So I'll click on this left side. And now here we have the line with a length of 60 units. You can also check it using the length and command. So again press enter and click on this line, and here we have this 60 unit length. If you want to change the length of this line now or the length of this arc dynamically by using your cursor, then you can select this dynamic option, and now you can click on the line and you can move your cursor to change the value. Similarly, you can also click here and change the length of this arc just like this. So now let's erase both of these geometries. So now let's have a look at the reverse tool. So using reverse tool, you can reverse the direction and also orientation of the object. So here we have a polyline, and in this polyline we have this starting width of 0 unit and an ending width of 10 unit. Now let's say that we want to reverse its direction. For that we need to expand the modify panel and select the reverse tool. So select it. Now select the object and press enter. Now although you may not see the change in direction, but when you look on the command line, just let's expand it, you'll see that the object direction has been reversed. So obviously the object direction has been reversed, but we are not able to see any change here in this polyline because it has not reversed the order in which the polyline has been made. And in order to apply the change on the order of this polyline, you need to change p line reverse width system variable to 1. So let's type p line reverse widths and press enter. So now you can see that its default value is set to 0. Let's change it to 1 and press enter. Now we'll repeat the command. So let's go to this modify, select the reverse tool, select the polyline and press enter. And now the direction has been reversed and also the orientation has been reversed in this case. This reverse direction tool is especially helpful for this kind of cases, and it's also helpful in the situations where you have a line type containing text and when the direction of text is not appropriate or not according to your requirements. So you can use this tool to reverse the direction of polyline or reverse the direction of line type to make it appropriate as per your requirement. So let's now once again change the system variable back to 0. And let's erase this object as well. So this was all about lengthen and reverse tool of AutoCAD. Okay, so now we have completed this module. Now we need to make this drawing using all of the commands and rules which are taught up to this point. I'll start with the polygon tool, and here on the draw panel, expand this flyout and set the polygon. Now we need to select 3 sides because we want to make a triangle. So select 3 and press enter. Now we don't need to specify any center point, rather we need to specify the edge length. So select edge and click at any point, and then the next point. The next point will be of 9 unit length. So type 9 and press enter. So there we have it, the triangle. Now we need to start with the circle tool. So go to circle, click on this point here and make a circle with radius of 3 unit and press enter. Now press enter again to repeat it, and now click on this point and enter a circle of radius 2 unit and press enter. Now you can make another circle at this point, or you can copy the existing circle. So I'll select copy, select the circle, press enter, click on the midpoint and move it on this one. Now press enter or cancel. Now we need to join both of these circles with the help of a circle which is tangent on both of them, and we can do that using tangent radius because the radius is also provided here. So go to the flyout and select tangent radius. Now click at the approximate points where they are touching, the first and the second point, and enter radius of 3 unit and press enter. There we have it. Now we can repeat this command and we can do it here also, or we can make a mirror image. So I'll make the mirror image, but before that I'll trim this. So I'll go to trim, press enter, and now trim this portion. Now we can make the mirror image of this small arc. So select it, click on mirror. Now click on this center point or the end point of triangle and join it with this midpoint and press enter. So now it is joined. Now for this side we need to join it with a straight line. So I'll go to line tool, I'll go to this quadrant and I'll join it with this quadrant and press enter. Now we only need to trim all the extra portions. So the first thing is this triangle which we need to delete. So I'll delete it and I'll go to trim, press enter, trim this and these two portions. There we have it, the final drawing as per our requirement.